This podcast deals with issues about LGBT families and trans-specific topics. We would love to hear from you and welcome your questions and comments. However, we will not tolerate any discriminatory language or hate speech, so please, just don't do it. Enjoy the show. There is a direct line between poverty and discrimination and criminality. And it's not that people want to go out and necessarily sell their bodies or sell drugs or do something else illegal, but desperate people will do desperate things to survive.
When we were kids, we met at camp.
After college, we got married.
10 years later, we finally had a baby.
That same year, I came out as trans.
This is the story of our journey.
Through marriage,
Parenting,
gender.
and all the changes that life brings.
This is Transition. I'd like to participate in the podcast, please. Hello. Is this turned up enough for you? Can you hear me okay? Or
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for tuning in again.
Sorry, that was a little loud. I got excited.
Calm down. All right. Thank you for joining us again for another delightful episode of Our Life in Transition. I am Shannon.
And I am Rachel.
And we are sitting here in our PJs.
Our finest PJs.
You changed your shirt. I put on some actual pants because I was cold. But
And you put on your fancy jewelry.
yes, I am.
You're being very fancy.
I was going to say bedazzled, not bedazzled. I'm bejeweled with my greatest finery. It's costume jewelry. Leave me alone.
Yeah, whatever. Whatever makes you feel better.
But yeah. So
We got our coffee. We got our popcorn.
I actually don't have coffee today. I have no drink. I have this.
You have 3-day-old seltzer that you left sitting by the computer.
Yes, I do. I could drink that. It would be. Well, it's water. Okay. But yeah. So anyway, so what's new?
We are still stuck here.
Yes, that's a thing. Yeah. So the world's still generally just on fire. Things are much worse than our last podcast when we gave you all kinds of numbers which were grossly inaccurate by the time the show actually came out. And they are more so now.
Yeah, like 10 times more so.
Yeah, so there's that.
It's called exponential growth.
Fun. Anyway.
But yeah, so we're still stuck here. But we're going to not talk about coronavirus today for the most part.
No, for the most part.
We're going to try and talk about some happy stuff. Some good things that are happening in the legislative world.
Yeah. Because there's still elections happening.
Right. Just because they've canceled, they've delayed all of the primaries and shit like that.
Except for Wisconsin. Wisconsin is still trying. It's like, we're going to do it on Tuesday.
And listen to me, my blue friends. Listen to me. There is still a choice to be made.
Uh-huh.
Don't let anybody kid you. You still have choices.
Yes.
And I'm not saying who to vote for, but I'm just saying you still have choices.
Exactly. Look at people's records. Look and see what they are have or are currently doing for you legislatively. Just going to say that.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do today is a follow-up to our episode from 2 episodes ago where we talked about all the horrific legislation that people are trying to pass or have recently passed.
Yeah, some of those things that we talked about a few weeks ago have actually now passed. I'm looking at you Idaho fuckers.
There's a tank kicking coming your way. Mm-hmm. If you see Rachel McDill walking in your direction, run.
Well, you have until after coronavirus.
Yeah.
Because I'm not traveling to Idaho right now, but look out. You're on notice. You're on my list. So, yes.
Again, we just want to clarify we are not going to assault any politicians. This is hashtag parody. Parody? Yes, parody.
Okay.
Hey, I'm putting it out there I don't want to get sued if you decide to beat the shit out of a politician, okay? This isn't my... I'm joking. You may be serious, but that's all you.
You're not worth the plane ride and the disease.
There's that.
But the point is that bigots don't let pandemics stop them.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some serious closet cases in Idaho who have some serious issues. And they are passing shit. And there's other stuff that's still pending that hasn't really gone anywhere because some people have actually decided to do their jobs during a pandemic.
I just want to say this: not everybody who is a bigot is a closet case. Some people are just bigots. So I don't want to give people. I don't want to give people the wrong impression to think that it's just people that are self-hating that are bigots and everybody else is fine. No, there's a lot of people who are just bigots because they're bigots. So
well, there are bigots who are bigots. And then there are also bigots who are really, 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 really self-loathing.
Yeah.
And, then we find...
few and far between, most of them are just
right. And then we find out, later on that there is a huge scandal. And, at any rate, I digress. So I have done lots of research. Because I am the librarian.
Yep.
And I've had nothing else to do. So, you want to just jump right in?
Sure.
All right. So there's some good stuff happening in the realm of healthcare. There's some pending legislation in Maryland that has to do with healthcare. Actually, Maryland very quietly has proposed a universal healthcare program.
Good for you, Maryland.
Called Healthy Maryland.
See, now we've gone and blown their cover.
And
exposed them.
Right. And their Healthy Maryland program will include coverage for gender reassignment surgeries.
Look at you, Catholics.
So they're not Catholics anymore.
People are like, what the fuck is she talking about?
Yes. Well.
What?
I'm just feeling like maybe you, I'm glad you don't have coffee, because you slept too well.
That's true. I had a good night's sleep. I fell asleep on the sofa, and then you came out to get me and the baby as we were sleeping on the sofa, and then I got up and was like, oh, okay. And then I had to wash my face because I had fantastic eye makeup on yesterday, and then I went to bed, and I slept for a very long time. I was very sleepy.
Back to the topic at hand. So yeah, that's pending. I think that's in committees and stuff like that. Maryland also has a bill prohibiting discrimination in healthcare facilities, which I feel like that shouldn't have to be legislated, but it does. Because people are assholes.
Bigots are everywhere, so you have to get them where they exist.
And Washington State has actually passed a bill, and it's waiting for a signature that prohibits discrimination in health insurance coverage. So that is good. Good on you, Washington State.
With the exception of the Pacific Northwest fascists there are about, Washington is a very nice place for people like me.
Yeah, but there are fascists everywhere.
That's true.
So why is healthcare important, as a legislated thing? Shannon.
Let's go to our expert. So, the LGBT community is just generally underserved to begin with. And it can be complicated, it can be difficult to get the care that you need, especially when you're trans, because there's all kinds of extra hurdles to go through, lots of fun gatekeeping, especially, when we're, when you get into talking about like GRS and things like that. It's ridiculously...
get 12 letters that says you're a girl.
Yeah, you've got to get a bunch of different letters. You've got to go and see multiple psychiatrists and go see different doctors just to get clearance to go, oh yeah, this is fine. You actually mean it. You don't want to just go and have random surgeries because,
Everybody just wants to get their junk cut off for the weekend.
Hey. It's not cut off.
Turned inside out.
Inside out. Yeah. Like a t-shirt. But and on top of that, it's ridiculously expensive. GRS is really fucking expensive. And depending on where you are, what health insurance you have, they may or may not cover it.
Because it's a complex procedure.
Yeah.
And it usually requires several doctors.
And understandably
working
so.
Together.
But a lot of health insurance doesn't or won't cover it. Because why? Why would they? Why would they do something that's medically necessary? Because to them, it's elective.
Right.
So, I mean, having, especially like the universal health care that they're trying to put forward in Maryland, which I think is just amazing, having that be part of that bill really opens up healthcare in a way that's not necessarily accessible to a lot of people, a lot of underserved people, a lot of people that are don't have the means to access it to begin with. So, I mean, that's the fact that it's a state-run universal healthcare program is amazing. Right.
Whether it'll pass or not,
fingers crossed.
Who knows? But it's not dead.
Yes.
So, I have seen some of these that, I started doing research on this, before, everything caught fire. Because it was going to be our episode
last
time.
Yeah.
And I was very discouraged when I went back to it this past week to see the number of things that had died in committee.
Yeah.
That they just, left to go by the wayside. But that is still, alive, just maybe delayed with all the other stuff that's going on. So...
the 3-day-old flat ulcer is not that bad.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So, I was actually surprised when I was doing my research, the amount of states that don't have human rights or civil rights acts on the books.
And not even just LGBT stuff, just in
general. They don't have
nothing.
A civil rights act or a human rights act. But there are some that do. Alaska has a state commission for human rights, and the bill that's pending there is basically adding to the state commission for human rights oversight to monitor discrimination on sexual orientation and gender identity.
So they have like a committee that looks at things and goes, no, that's a paddling, and that's and now this is something that they
and now this is something that they get to go look at too.
Interesting. Alaska's an interesting place. You don't hear about Alaska too often.
Yeah, well, because there's like 5 people there.
Yeah, well, my cousin's there. I have a cousin who lives in Alaska.
I have a couple friends who live in Alaska too.
Yeah, he's a ranger. Why are you just staring at me?
I was just wondering what this has to do with anything.
Nothing. It's just a non sequitur. It's just info that I'm giving out to the public about me.
Okay.
The more you know.
I'm gonna have to drug her by later today because I'm not gonna be able to stand this. Okay. California, which I'm actually shocked about, has a bill pending to create a commission on human rights. They do not have a commission on human rights. Alaska is ahead of California on a commission for human rights.
So, well, I mean, does California have like a human rights statute on the books?
Yeah, but they don't have anybody like studying it, looking at it, making sure that shit is getting done. So they say no, you can't do that.
So they have legislation
that people actually pay attention to it.
So they have legislation that says this should be a paddle, and now they're going to create a committee to go, no, that is definitely a paddle. Gotcha.
Right.
All right.
I'm a little concerned about your obsession with paddling right now.
Hey, listen.
So states that do have a Civil Rights or Human Rights Act right now are adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the protected classes under their current acts. And right now it's pending in Georgia. It's actually pending from 2019 in Georgia. They haven't done anything with it. It's pending in Idaho. Because there's one progressive there that's trying. Indiana, Kentucky. It's also held over from last session in Michigan, and then Ohio and West Virginia. They all have bills to add sexual orientation and gender identity to protections in their existing bills. Kansas Kansas is different, and I think this is interesting. Kansas must have a person who knows what they're doing, and who understands the nuances here, because Kansas's act against discrimination is being proposed to be amended to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression.
Yeah, you got to cover all of your bases.
Right.
Because you can be like, oh, okay, well, your sexual orientation, so, okay, fine, that you want to love somebody, that's fine. If you want to identify whoever you want, good for you, but don't you dress up. Makes sense.
Right. So, I mean, they're covering all their bases and stuff like that. Illinois, there's also a bill that's been pending since 2019 to amend their Human Rights Act, and it actually, in the original Human Rights Act, sexual orientation and gender identity were kind of put together.
Right.
And now somebody is being smart, and they're actually separating sexual orientation and gender identity and defining gender identity in the Human Rights Act, so that there's no question about what that means. And they're also including gender identity protections in their hate crime statutes.
Okay. Well, and that makes sense. They need to clarify that, because for the same reason that there was the issue with the Title IX cases, in the case that came in front of the Supreme Court, because they said, oh, well, they only meant biological sex. They didn't mean gender at all when they said sex.
Right. So now this is really trying to define it a lot more. And I think that, because people are actually understanding the language a little bit better, So Missouri, Nebraska, South Carolina, and Wisconsin do not have anti-discrimination laws.
I'm shocked.
But Missouri and Nebraska this session, and South Carolina and Wisconsin as of 2019, are proposing new anti-discrimination laws, and they are including sexual orientation and gender identity, and in Wisconsin also gender expression in their protected classes.
I think about a smarty up there too. Good.
Yeah. Virginia has passed and signed I see Danica Rome in everything in everything here. Has passed and signed a law which actually allows local governments to enact their own human rights ordinances. So you can, in addition to being in violation of the state's human rights, you could actually, you can get a paddling from your local government too.
Well, and that's an important thing, because a lot of states there'll be local ordinances, and then the state, will come in and go, oh, well, no, we're going to override that. And we're going to say you can't protect somebody. So this is good in that
this is the opposite. They're actually saying you can be a lot more.
Yes.
And also, local governments know what's going on. State processes can take time to report civil rights violations, human rights violations. There's a long, long process that a lot of this stuff goes through. Sometimes it goes through commissions and stuff like that. If you can deal with it in your local government, I think that's important. This law goes into effect July 1st.
Fantastic.
It is there, and it goes into effect July 1st. In addition, Wisconsin, somebody's progressive in Wisconsin, they're trying to add an equal rights section to their state constitution. And their equal rights section in the state constitution includes sex, gender identity, race, color, sexual orientation, disability, religion, national origin, marital status, family status, age, and ancestry. And I think that's a big deal.
I'm just... it's ridiculous that some of those even need to be clarified that you can't do, but fine, okay.
But, bigots are bigots.
Yeah.
And if they can find something to hold against you, they will,
The ancestry one is interesting.
Well,
you don't see too much of that. Well, I guess you do, but like
Identity Europa.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah,
well, when suddenly there's Nazis about, you start getting
you start getting real specific about that shit.
Yeah. So Despite what a lot of people think, discrimination does exist. I mean, to that point, I mean, there are Nazis about, but like,
but even little minor like things are.
Yeah, and
they don't have to be marching down the street, you know.
And people will think, oh well, okay, somebody might just, maybe they're racist, but they keep that to themselves. No. There are some people who just actively will go ahead and discriminate against somebody. They'll fire people. They'll... And
just because they're keeping it to themselves doesn't mean they're not acting on it.
Right.
Just because they don't say something racist or sexist or anti-LGBT doesn't mean that they're not thinking of it and making decisions based on it.
Right. And the thing is, like, when you have protections in place, it prevents people from being allowed to publicly other people that are different from them. And they can have whatever prejudices they want, but they're not allowed to act on it, and they're not allowed to, and in not being allowed to act on it, they can't inform the opinions of other people that this is okay to do.
And if they act on it, there's legal consequences for them acting on it.
Paddling.
A paddling. Wow.
Hey, you got kick him in the taint. I'm looking for my thing, alright?
Alright. There's also some interesting stuff happening in relation to courts, and this didn't even occur to me. See, the things that you need protections for.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me. New Jersey has a law pending to prohibit juror disqualification based on gender identity or sexual orientation.
Yay, Jersey. Yeah,
it never occurred to me that would be a thing that you would have to worry about.
Well, I know that from being on jury duty here in New Jersey, and also from just learning a little bit about courts, especially in the criminal justice class that I took when I was in college. That they've had very specific, I guess, regulations, for lack of a better word, regarding race and just dismissing jurors because of that. But gender identity and sexual orientation, that makes sense.
It makes sense. It just didn't occur to me that would be a thing that would be needed, because
lawyers are bigots.
Well, because and their defendants are bigots.
Right.
But I don't think that way, so I don't think of these things.
Right.
Additionally, Colorado, yay Colorado, has a bill pending to prohibit gay or trans panic defense.
Right.
So, do you want to explain a little bit what that is?
Well, and again, give New Jersey a pat on the back. We already have one that I think we passed that last year. Mm-hmm. But there's been a bunch of states in the past couple of years who have actually banned this. Because one of the things that people will do, you murder a gay person, you murder a trans person, and they're like, oh, well, I panicked.
Because I found out that they were.
Yeah, I found out that they were gay, or I found out that they were trans, and I got scared. And, first of all, if you are in a position where you're being intimate with a gay person or a trans person, you probably already know. But even so, then you just go, oh, okay, I'm sorry. No, thank you. You don't kill them. That's not okay. And people will use it as a defense and go, oh, well, I was temporarily insane because I panicked because I thought I was being gayed upon. That was the defense that they used in the Matthew Shepard case. Mm-hmm. That's the defense that gets used in cases where somebody's boyfriend or person or John or whatever kills a trans woman because they're like, oh, well, I didn't know that they were trans. Like, yes, you did, and you felt guilty about it afterwards because you're self-loathing. And it's a bullshit defense, and just because you find out something, that doesn't give you the right to kill somebody.
It doesn't give you the right to murder somebody because, even if you didn't know that they were trans, you say, oh, I'm not really into that. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, move on.
It does not require murder.
Yeah.
And if you're that not in control of yourself on a regular basis, you got other problems, and it has nothing to do with somebody being trans.
Exactly. And as far as the thing with the not being able to ban jurors because of their or disqualify jurors because of their gender identity or sexual orientation, if you're on trial, you need to be able to have a jury of your peers. It's like one thing that does happen, although it's not supposed to. A lot of juries don't have a lot of black people on them, and even if you can't explicitly be like, oh well, yeah, no, they're black, and just disqualify all the black people. If you find other reasons, it happens. And when you don't have that perspective, there can be unintentional bias in the jurors because they don't have that lived experience. They don't know what it's like being black, and they just assume, oh, well, clearly you're a criminal.
And you should have a jury of your peers when you're being tried.
Exactly.
And you should also have a jury of the victim's peers.
Correct. So if you're being tried and, okay, well, maybe you're a bigot, maybe you have, oh, okay, well, this person was gay, this person was trans, just excluding people because they are gay or trans from being on the jury is not okay. And that's, people do that in an attempt to go, oh, well, okay, well, they might have a perspective on this. Well, yeah, okay.
A jury of your peers doesn't mean people just like you.
Exactly.
And I think that's what a lot of people think. It's not a jury of people that you would go out and have a beer with. Yeah. It's a jury of people of your...
So other citizens. That's what it means. Other citizens. It means everybody.
That are citizens, that are not, the judge in the case. And not, like, there are other people that are citizens that are living in your general area, that are in your state, that are in your, it's not like people that are just like you. And like when I was on jury duty, I found, and I hated it, like, I got excused anyway, so, but I had to sit through all the freaking questions before I got excused. But there was a lot of asking people what news stations they watched. And I'm like, and suddenly the people that got challenged were, people who watch MSNBC and like, so, and I'm like, okay, all right. So, I mean, there's still a lot of things that a lot of ways that, to get around it, but it's a step in the right direction.
Right.
I'm not saying that all trans people watch MSNBC.
You were considering that for a long time.
Well, because I was going to say, I'm just saying that they don't watch Fox News, but then I was thinking about Caitlin.
Yeah, well, listen, I know a couple people, so yeah.
So anyway, that's like all the court stuff. Thanks again for listening to the show.
If you like what you hear so far, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, be sure to share with your friends and family so they can enjoy as well.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. So there's a bunch of stuff also that deals with schools and children. And just like we had a category of horrors related to anti-LGBT stuff and schools and children, there's also some good stuff being done. In Indiana, there's a bill pending right now that says that any schools that receive public money, now that's not necessarily public schools, that's also charter schools, private schools that get any subsidies, anything like that.
Yeah.
Private schools that are choice schools, where they get like a voucher or something like that, that's public money.
Anybody, any place that your tax dollars are going to.
Right. So they cannot discriminate against staff or students based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Right.
So, and that's important. And it's important that it says staff or students, because there's a lot of teachers.
Yeah. Well, because, there's always some holier than thou religious nut who's just screaming, well, somebody think of the children, and the children are fine.
Yeah.
But
it's not about the children.
It's about you and your bigotry.
Massachusetts has a bill pending also that prohibits discrimination by any educational institution. Any educational institution in this state. That is educational institution from preschool to postdoctorate.
So everybody, public, private, doesn't matter, anything.
Educational institution that is in the state of Massachusetts cannot discriminate based on sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity.
Good.
Rhode Island has a bill that's creating an anti-bullying Bill of Rights for their students.
Say that 5 times fast, Rachel.
No. And so that's not specifically LGBT, but LGBT students are,
bullied, harassed.
getting bullied and harassed.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why. If that's the reason, it doesn't make a difference. You're not allowed to harass or bully people.
Right. Virginia. Oh, Danica. I'm giving Danica Rum credit for all of these, and I'm not sure if it's correct or not. But
she's involved in a lot of it.
I just feel like
she's in the notes later.
If she's not doing it, she's like shoving people into doing it.
Can I help you, dog?
She wants popcorn.
Here. Wow, Rachel. Okay, I went to go toss popcorn to the dog, and Rachel just blocked me. I was like, not today, not in my house. There you go.
All right. Virginia. And this is signed. This is happening. Virginia is requiring their state Department of Education to create and disseminate model policies concerning the treatment of transgender students that will be in compliance with non-discrimination laws. The Department of Education has to do that by the end of 2020.
Good.
And then local school boards have to take that information and those model policies from the Department of Education and adopt their own policies that adhere to the State Department's policies no later than by the 2021-2022 school year.
So not this coming school year, but the
following one.
School year.
They have a full year because it doesn't have to be done until December.
Right.
So they have a full, like a school year and a half.
Right.
To figure this out, but they have to do it. They're required to do it. And that law is effective July 1st. So starting July 1st, the Department of Education has to start making these policies, and then the school boards have to adopt non-discrimination policies for transgender students. And I think that I really think reading up on this a little bit, I think it's going to go beyond, not being a dick to transgender students. I think it's going to be more in line with, using proper pronouns, using preferred names,
right?
And creating a safe environment for students. So I'm excited about this. Like, somebody is thinking of the children.
Yes. And the thing is, you need to have a safe learning environment. If you're being bullied, if you're being harassed, if you're being discriminated against, you can't focus on learning. And that's what school is for. It's there to teach. And part of school is to teach kids how to be good citizens. And part of being a good citizen is learning not to be a bigot. And, you need to create a safe learning environment so that the students that you are under your care can do well and succeed. And they can't do that if they're getting the shit kicked out of them, if they're being harassed, if they're being discriminated against, if they're being told they can't wear the clothing that aligns with their gender, and made to feel horrible and depressed all the time.
Right. We want the kids to graduate.
Right.
We don't want them to leave school because they're killing themselves.
Exactly. And as far as employment discrimination, it really is fucking frustrating that there's still people that are like, oh, homosexuals and trans people are just trying to convert the children.
That's prey upon them.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And to be perfectly honest, even when we were kids, even the most liberal people that I knew, even people in my family, like had this like worry about like, oh, I don't know if we should have, you know, gay people around the kids. Like there's always this like pearl clutching, hand wringing obsession with queer people that they're out to get the children. It's like the fucking like witch in Hansel and Gretel. Like nobody's after your fucking kids.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I had a gay teacher.
Oh my god! You told me about this.
In 10th grade, most supportive, loving, wonderful teacher that anyone in that school has had.
Yeah.
Anybody that had him loved him, and he loved all of his students, supported all of his students in school, after school, at his summer job. Like, because teachers have summer jobs, like, they don't just take the summer off. But, you know, like, and I think I learned the most about being a human being in a community. Like, he was an English teacher, and I learned a lot of literature and stuff like that, and he pushed me, and I read stuff that I never would have read before, and it was a great class. But more than that, the students in his class learned about community and about supporting each other and about just, you know, what it means to be a good human being. And to think that, you know, in some places, still, right now, and that was, I'm old, that was in 2000. But in some places, 20 years later, they won't hire a gay teacher.
Well,
and you're missing, those students who are not getting that teacher are missing a lot right. that the LGBT community can offer.
And, you know, and we know people that are dealing with that now. My one friend is trans, was living in South Carolina. We've talked about this before. And just went through all kinds of horror in trying to be herself. And ultimately she wound up moving. She moved across the country to an area that is more accepting, and she, you know, has a job out there now. But, like, she, like, had to give up her job and leave. And not that her students wanted her to. But
the parents
did, the staff did, and like, oh, you can't do this. It's like, well, she's not hurting anybody. She's just trying to be herself. They made it so horrible for her that she wound up leaving, and it's just heartbreaking that that's something that happens all over the place because people aren't stopped from being bigots.
And I think, you know, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I do that.
Yeah. I just think, and kids, look, there are LGBT kids.
Right.
LGBTQIA+ kids
...
in schools right now. And by not employing members of their community, the message is being sent that they're bad, that they're wrong.
Yeah.
That they don't have a future.
Yeah, so I mean,
you're closing the door for all of those students. You're saying to them, you can't be a teacher.
Yeah.
You can't be a part of, you know,
society. You've got limits.
And they don't see people like them.
Yeah.
It's the same as, you know, having
a black teacher.
A black teacher.
Or a female teacher.
Or a female teacher, exactly. I will say this. I didn't have a black teacher until college.
I think you mentioned that before.
I did not have a black teacher until college. There were black students in my school, in my high school. Not in my grade schools, but in my high school. There were black students in my high school. And they didn't see anybody like them. I think I could name on one hand the number of Latino teachers. And we had a lot of Latino students and black students, and they had nobody like them.
Right. Well, and even
you need to have people like you so that you can look up to people.
Well, even the teacher that you were talking about, that was such an influence, and you know that they were gay. They weren't really out back then.
No, everybody knew.
It was just one of those like unsaid things. You just don't talk about it, but everybody knows. It's very clear.
Right.
And it's one thing to have, and it's important to have non-discrimination policies so that the students aren't being harassed, aren't being bullied, aren't being picked upon, aren't being kicked out of school for being who they are. But you also need to have that representation so that they can see what they can achieve, who they can be. Because it's not just a matter of trying to live in the now. It's about having an aspiration to where you're going to be in the future.
Which is why in New Jersey, there's this huge backlash, and a couple other states, I think, they've added LGBT
History? Yeah.
history curriculum.
It's on the books. It's not going away. It's going to happen. But
one of our local schools is doing a pilot program with it, and, the evangelicals in the area are losing their shit. But the evangelicals and the Catholics, we have some conservative Catholics that are they're teamed up, who knew, losing their shit together because, everybody can agree to hate the gays. But it's important. It's important.
I was thinking about that meme with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, clasping hands together.
It's important to show that there have been LGBT people throughout history, and they have made important contributions. People need to know that it's okay, and that there's a future for them.
A lot of the famous people that you are reading about in your English class, they were gay. Lots. Damn artsy people. But yeah, and it's there's always somebody who's going to have an issue around this, especially when it comes to kids. Because even if you aren't able to, control adults, there is a level to which there's a sacrosanct understanding that parents have some control over their kids because, kids belong to you.
Well, and I don't.
And so then parental opinions, even bigoted, hateful ones, are supposed to matter somehow. And you need to be able to just kind of draw a line and go, no, this is not okay.
Right. So kudos to Virginia.
Yes. Well done.
And kudos to Indiana and Massachusetts and Rhode Island for that too. Now, talking about teachers, and there are some employment anti-discrimination that are specific to employment. Louisiana is proposing its first Employment Non-Discrimination Act. They don't have an Employment Non-Discrimination Act.
Well done, Louisiana.
But they're proposing one, and sexual orientation and gender identity are protected in it. Rhode Island, this is very interesting. They are prohibiting discrimination in employment in all forms. I mean, it's a wide-ranging bill. But they're also forbidding companies to require employees to sign NDAs. So if an employee complains about a civil rights violation, a human rights violation, any kind of HR issue, even if the issue gets settled, they can't require them to say, well, the settlement or whatever is contingent on you signing a non-disclosure agreement. So you cannot hide. In Rhode Island, if you're a corporation or an employer doing wrong, you cannot hide it because the employees or former employees can always speak out and say, this is what happened to me.
Well, and this is, that's what the Cheeto and Mike Bloomberg like to do all the time, this was an issue when Mike Bloomberg... Yeah, we'll pay you off and then
was running
sign
for
this
5
and
minutes.
You can't talk. Which makes you wonder, what the fuck is going on in Rhode Island that this is such an issue that they're like, oh, well, you can't do this. Because this is happening a lot. That's the thing about laws. Usually laws aren't put in the books unless there's an extant issue going on.
I don't know what companies are based in Rhode Island. Is anything actually there? No.
Breweries.
There's breweries everywhere.
Peter Griffin. I don't know.
Peter Griffin's not real.
Shut your mouth. It's probably for the best. It's actually... I would not want that to be... Well, listen. That show might be fake. There's somebody like that somewhere.
But look, in Rhode Island is tiny, and I don't know what's really there, except one of my girlfriends is there.
What girlfriends, Rachel? What? Don't look at me like that. I'm going to look away now.
That's right, you look away in discomfort. But, so I don't really know what's in Rhode Island, but at least this is on the books so that if there is ever anything in Rhode Island, you know, it's a good thing to have. And I don't know when this was proposed. This might have come about, you know, because of all the discussion about NDAs.
Maybe.
You know, a lot of things do. You know, they talk about it, and it becomes a big thing, and people go, oh, you know what, we're just going to head that off before it becomes a problem. You know, in our state, you can't do that. You know, CVS is in Rhode Island.
That's the biggest company in Rhode Island. I don't know if
But they're based there.
Based in Rhode Island, yeah.
Anyway, if you're from Rhode Island, tell us what's there.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I'll look it up. We'll look that up later. Something to read about in all of our free time.
But, so, you know, employee non-discrimination stuff is important, you know, to everybody. But, you know, the LGBT community suffers from disproportionate unemployment.
You know, and that's one of the biggest issues with trans people in this country is just the rampant unemployment, which, I mean, everybody's unemployed right now. But, you know, especially, you know, like black trans women are constantly without work. And...
Well, because it's a double whammy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're in two chronically underemployed communities.
And, you know, it's, you know, we were talking about those...
Three, because they're women.
Yeah.
They're LGBT, and they're black.
Yeah, you tick off all the boxes, Rachel. You know, we were talking about insurance and access to healthcare. I mean, one of the biggest things about having a job is having money and or employer-based health insurance in order to be able to medically take care of yourself. And, you know, and one of the things which people look at a lot of folks in the LGBT community who are turning to sex work, turning to other kinds of illegal activities like selling drugs or something to get by and go, oh, well, what's wrong with you that you are doing that? Well, you can't fucking get a job. And if, you know, you got kicked out of your house and you were discriminated in school when you were a teenager, yeah, you might have done that really early and you never got to go to college and you really don't have a lot of resources and that's why you're doing this. And then you wind up in jail and being discriminated against there too. There is a direct line between poverty and discrimination and criminality. And it's not that people want to go out and necessarily sell their bodies or sell drugs or do something else illegal, but desperate people will do desperate things to survive. Having protections that will keep employers from just blocking a whole category of people from having jobs is very important.
Yes.
Get off my soapbox now.
It's okay. Don't trip on the way down.
Okay.
So another area that some states are trying to offer protections with is housing. Illinois has a bill pending that prohibits loan servicers from discriminating based on your familial status. So, I mean, if you're in a same-sex relationship, or if you're single with kids, or anything like that, I don't understand why they would necessarily be discriminating based on familial status, but I'm sure there's a reason. Or there's not a reason, and they're just assholes. Assholes be assholes. But in Illinois, and, you know, it's more than an LGBT issue, of course, in this case, but a lot of LGBT families do suffer some kind of discrimination because, you know...
Well, it's the same as with a lot of other minorities, especially people of color. You know, they go to get a loan, they go to try to buy a house, and, you know, the loan officer, the real estate agents are like, oh, no, not you.
Right.
And the same thing happens in the LGBT community all the time.
And so there's that. Maryland and Rhode Island and Virginia also have pending blanket anti-discrimination laws in housing. It's been passed.
Virginia's really on the ball right now.
Well, it's been passed but not signed yet in Maryland. It's pending in Rhode Island. It was actually continued to the 2021 session in Virginia. I don't know why. Maybe they're like, we can't give the LGBT people too much. You know, we can't do everything all at once.
Calm down.
They
might have upward mobility. Stop them.
I think it has something to do. It's been through a lot of committees and stuff and been bounced back and forth to different committees. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with either something procedural or if they're doing some kind of studies or something like that.
I'm not sure.
But it's not dead. It's just been held over
Yeah.
to 2021.
Been tabled.
Right. Nebraska had a bill that was put in the end of 2019 and was carried over into the current session that prohibits discriminations by sellers or landlords based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or citizenship
Interesting.
in any real estate transaction or lease. So they can't ask you any of that. If they find out, they can't use any of it. And just, if you want to sell your property, sell your fucking property. If you want to rent your building, rent your fucking building.
Yeah.
You know, and don't worry about it.
Money still spends.
Right.
You know, and you know, and this kind of ties back into what I was just talking about with, you know, job discrimination is, you know, if people don't have a place to live, you know, if you don't have a place to live, it's hard to get a job. If you don't have a place to live, it's hard to go to school. If you don't have a place to live, I mean, where the fuck are you going to get your mail? Like, it's, how are you going to take care of yourself? You know, it's...
You can't even have a bank account if you don't have an address.
Yeah. It is the key to a lot of other issues that people run into. And again, you know, they can't use that as a jumping off point to get a job, to take care of themselves, to get health care. Like, it's...
And God forbid if you're trans and homeless, you don't even know what shelter you can go to.
Well, that's...
I mean, you're sleeping under a bridge because
and that's
half the shelters won't take you, you know...
Well, and that's the same thing as...
Or you can't be safe in a shelter.
You know, the thing with trans women, especially in shelters, is similar to what won't somebody think of the children in schools, is that, you know, there's a bunch of turfy people, and I will use that term, and you can go ahead and yell at me in the comments if you want to, that think that, well, trans women are just men, and they're going to sexually assault us. No, they're trying to find a safe place to be because they don't want to get sexually assaulted.
Seriously, guys, why are you so obsessed with, like, being sexually assaulted?
I mean, I get it. I get trauma. I get fear. I understand that, especially in you know, a women's shelter. There's a lot of that. I totally understand it. But trans women are there for the same reasons that you are.
Right.
They've been assaulted. They've been discriminated against. They've been...
I'll say it again. Trans people are not going through all of this so that they can assault you. This is a whole lot to go through.
Yeah, it's the worst long game ever. But, you know, and I mean, basically what, you know, this housing discrimination in the LGBT community it's the same thing as redlining. It's the same thing as redlining, where it's like, no, you can't live here. This place is not for you. This is for other people. You're lower, and you're not supposed to be in this neighborhood. Go away.
Fuck that shit.
And not even necessarily they're being redlined to a specific area. It's just like, no, just go away. Scram.
Yeah, you know...
It's... I don't have anything else to say about that. I'm just... So what else is happening?
So other laws that are not really necessarily in any specific category. Massachusetts has a law from 2019 that is pending still that prohibits discrimination in state contracts. So that's good. It's kind of employment, but it's kind of not employment. New Jersey.
Yes.
Yes. and I think this has been brought up a couple of times, and it doesn't actually go anywhere, but hopefully it'll go somewhere this time.
Maybe.
Is prohibits this. I think this has actually been going around in a circle since the bathroom bills first started in North Carolina. New Jersey has a bill to prohibit state-sponsored travel to states that do not have anti-discrimination protections based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. It has not passed yet, but there are people that are still trying, and they try valiantly. And the idea with that is, to hit people in their pocketbooks. I mean, you know, if you can't have a convention in something in North Carolina because nobody will come because of your bathroom bill, maybe you rethink your bathroom bill.
Yeah. And it's happened in several states wherein you have, it's actually the free market, has, especially like places like Georgia, which there's a lot of filming there because of their tax breaks. And, productions just said, oh, well, we're not going to come there. Businesses say, we're not going to come to your state. Same thing happened in, I forget which Dakota was trying to pass the one anti-LGBT. South Dakota was trying to pass the one anti-LGBT bill that we were talking about 2 episodes ago. And they pulled it in part because like a bunch of businesses said, we're not coming to your state. You will have no money. And hitting them in the pocketbook is a really smart and effective way of preventing any kind of bigotry from happening.
Right. And New York has a pending law that will, it's called the Gender Recognition Act, and it will allow for an easier change of gender marker on state paperwork, so birth certificates, death certificates, IDs, etc. And it also allows for the X designation on all state paperwork. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that New York actually has the X on the license, but now you can also put it on a birth certificate, a death certificate.
Gotcha.
Anything else that is issued by the state. It makes it a lot easier. You have to go through the court process, but you don't have to go through quite as much of a process. It's pretty much a rubber stamp if you file the paperwork.
It's kind of
to do the gender marker.
Self-attestation, and then they're just like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. It eliminates a lot of the gatekeeping and stuff like that, which is helpful.
Well, and I have to, applaud New Jersey. Since Chris Christie is no longer our fucking governor, they've done a lot very quickly in the past couple of years. As far as things like being able to change your gender marker, having, LGBT education in schools, and proposing this ban on state-sponsored travel. Now, here's the thing. I don't know. Did you look up and see when that has kind of circled around before in New Jersey?
It's come up every session since 2017.
Okay, so
since the end of 2017.
Okay, so maybe
people have been trying to do it, but
we'll see what happens with it. But it's being proposed, and it's being proposed, and
there are some squeaky wheels, which is good. I think there's some logistical things make it hard to really not do any kind of business with other states, and kind of I think people would argue that trying to force other states to take up legislation is so that they don't lose business is kind of
it's heavy-handed, but
and I think that's why it doesn't pass, but it needs to be, because states need to, because that's what people understand. People understand, and
money talks.
And people understand, if there's a some kind of convention or something like that, and an entire department from an entire state can't go because it's in a state that they're not going to have it there.
Right.
And if there's more than one state that's doing this, they're definitely not going to have it there.
Well, and that kind of political pressure is how these things get moved forward. The thing with the gender marker, a couple states did it. Here and there, New Jersey did it. Other states it's a domino effect. And it's the same thing that happened with marriage equality. It's like, one state did it, then another state did it, then another state did it. And then, people try to fight it, and eventually,
it's just the norm.
It's just the norm, and it's everywhere. And it's...
But it's got to be normalized in little sections before it gets to be, before everybody just says, we're, for lack of a better term, we're pissing in the wind with this, we might as well, just accept it because it's a thing,
Sorry, just I have a vivid imagination. The visual is...
So anyway... So there's some bright spots, and I
Absolutely.
hope that hey, Virginia, you were doing
well
great.
Done.
And we love you. And there's a lot of bright spots. I mean, there's a lot of horror, of horror in the world, but there are some bright spots. There are places that are there are people that are trying to do the right thing here.
Right.
And it's an uphill battle for a lot of them, and a lot of these are going to die. That's the unfortunate thing, is that a lot of these are not going to pass, but hopefully they'll come around again and again and again and again every session until they don't die.
It's a war of attrition, and it's, you get 1 inch, and, a lot of them will not pass, but a percentage will. And
you know what?
That's how we make progress.
A few years ago, most of these would have died in committee.
Yeah.
So the fact that some of
People
these are out of committee and are at least on the floor
and some of them have passed.
Right.
So, I mean,
is a big deal. And the fact that some of them have passed, even the ones that are awaiting a signature that are just, sitting on a desk somewhere, like stuff is happening. And it's just, we all wish that it would happen just like that overnight, and everybody would just wake up and have an epiphany. But at least something is happening. So the important thing is to pay attention to the local and state stuff that's going on, because while you're watching the pandemic, other stuff is still happening.
Yeah.
And if you look away and you stop putting that pressure on your local legislators and stuff like that, that's when bad things happen. So keep putting that pressure on.
You've got tons of free time right now. Call your legislators, write them, email them, tweet them, whatever. Hound them to do the right thing, because they're still working in some capacity. So if you've got time, if you're not an essential employee, then put that to good use if you can.
Right. And we said in the last one, consider making some donations. I know that there's a lot of people that are hurting financially right now.
Yeah.
But if you can't donate money, think about if you're sitting at home and you're furloughed right now or something like that, maybe you can donate your time.
Absolutely.
Maybe you can do some calling for the Human Rights Campaign,
ACLU, something like that.
ACLU, ours in New Jersey, Garden State Equality.
Yeah.
And think about, how you can maybe help your local groups, even if it's not monetarily. And vote. The primary is not over, people. Vote by any means necessary.
Yes.
If you are in a state that has not had a primary yet, go online and figure out how to sign up for vote by mail and do it. Don't let this pandemic keep you away from voting.
Yeah.
You can vote by mail.
Don't let circumstances which are out of your hands steal your right to vote. Take advantage of this time. Fill out a form. It takes 5 minutes to do, and vote. You'll get your thing in the mail. You'll have all the time to think about it. And this is one of the things, especially with local politics, is sometimes you don't hear about people until you're in the voting booth and you're like, who is this that is on the ballot? You'll have all the time to look them up and figure out who the fuck these people are. But the primaries, you know who they are. You know who is running. Vote. It's not over. Vote.
And support your LGBT candidates.
That's how you get your Danica Romes.
That's right. I really hope she listens to this. We should at her.
Should tag her in the podcast tweets.
But no, people like Danica Rome are on the front lines of this. And, she was a long shot candidate.
Yeah.
And she had grassroots support. And the only way to get representation that's like you is to support them when they come up.
Yeah. If you don't fight for the people who are going to fight for you, then you're never going to get what you need.
Exactly. And the more...
I should make that a t-shirt. That's a good quote.
And the more LGBT candidates, like, the law of statistics says that if 50 run, one's going to get in. Mm-hmm. So if 100 run, 2 will get in. Like, I just made those statistics up. But I mean, you need people running in order to be elected.
Well, it's the same as with the legislation. It's the law of averages. The more you put it out there, the more they're going to pass.
Exactly. At some point, it's going to happen. So, I mean, support those LGBT candidates. And if you know an LGBT person that is just perfect for government,
encourage them.
Encourage them. Tell them to start with the school board.
Yeah.
Start with the school board and go on up.
Yep.
Encourage people like you to be your representative.
Exactly.
Because I know all of you watching this podcast are not... Okay, none of you are watching this podcast.
Well, they might be watching the YouTube video. Nobody watches the YouTube video, but it's there.
I know all of you listening to this podcast are not 70-plus-year-old white men. And that means that you're underrepresented.
Yes.
So, get some people like you, get behind some people like you, or get some people like you running.
Yes.
That's what you can do. Okay? I'm done.
You're done?
I'm done right now.
Okay.
Hey, guys.
Gals.
And gals. Not a guy-girl thing, All.
All right, Mallory.
Rachel is a hero to all.
That was your season 1 kick him in the taint thing. It's like you reference that like every episode. Now you're bringing it back. It's nice to be back.
Look, we're bored. We're bored here. Shannon and I are bored. So we're doing these lovely little mini episodes called Coffee Breaks.
Coffee break.
And that was weird.
I am sorry. I do that a lot.
And so go and check them out. Mm-hmm. They're not crazy long like these. They're little 20-minute episodes. Yeah. And it's just one or the other of us just talking about stuff. Yeah. So,
you did one about coping with being stuck in the house? Lockdown? I did one about coping with makeup.
And there'll be more coming.
Yeah.
We've got some ideas. There'll be more coming because we have nothing to do. Mm-hmm. So check them out, and I don't know what else to say. Bye. Thank you for listening. Yes. I am Rachel.
And I am Shannon.
And this has been Our Life in Transition. Talk to you soon.
Toodles.
Thank you again for listening to Our Life in Transition.
This show is hosted by Rachel and Shannon McDill.
Our producer and editor is Shannon McDill.
Theme music is Seize the Day by Jens Kiilstofte. Check him out at jens.kiilstofte.net.
Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/olitpod. That's /OLITPOD.
Your support makes this show possible. Thank you.